Hello, Realty Pros. Wanted to come back to you guys and walk through our buying template. So we talked about how to create a buying loop and also what the buyer agency documents entail. So today we're going to go through the buying template itself so that you can understand it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And once I do, that's going to take me into Dotloop Premium. So as you can see, I've created a sample buyer loop. You see Mr. Buyer Purchase. So first I'll say that I absolutely recommend the template for your buying loop: name, transaction type, property address. That's going to save you tons of time on finding loops once you get multiple transactions. So as you see, we have Mr. Buyer Purchase, and once we get an address, once we have a ratified contract, then we're going to put that property address after the transaction type. All right, so we've gone through your buyer agency documents. Now we're going to go through your offer/contract documents. So I'm going to go ahead and open them for you by clicking on the checkbox next to offer contract documents, going up to the top of the screen and clicking on open. All right, so while this is opening, you're going to see a number of things in this template. We're starting out with the checklist, which is for your reference. This doesn't go over to your buyer to sign. This is for you so that you know all of the components that need to be in your offer, so you can do a self-check to make sure that your offer is complete. So the first thing is going to be your introduction letter, and this is just Porterhouse proprietary information. It's very, specific to our Porterhouse model in that you deserve the best. We believe our clients, as well as the other agents that we're working with, deserve the best. So we want to make our offer very nice and presentable. So we even do a letter to the other agent, followed by the offer synopsis. The synopsis we're going to walk through in detail. The lender letter, copy of the earnest money deposit. So these two, the lender letter as well as the copy of the earnest money deposit, those are going to be PDF files, as well as the buyer letter to the seller. Those are going to be PDF files which you're going to upload into this loop. All right. Now, your buyer agency documents are going to be here already, and we'll walk through those. The body of your offer, which is going to be your residential contract of sale. We'll spend the most time on that for today. And every other addenda is going to be property specific. So there will be county specific or jurisdictional specific documents that we will add, and those documents that introduce contingencies into the contract, we're going to add those as well. And lastly, the seller's disclosures. So because this is a purchase loop, or I should say a dummy loop in a sense, just for practice, we don't have seller's disclosures, but this is what they would entail when we do. And then we wrap it up with a nice bow when we put our thank you at the end of it, and all of this is already a part of the template for you. So here's that letter to the other agent, which we already talked about. You're simply going to put your name in there, read through the letter. It's meant to just establish a good rapport along with the conversation that you should have already had with the other agent by this point. You're going to put your name in there as well as your cell phone and make sure that those fields are completed. And then we're going to scroll down to the offer synopsis. Now, this synopsis is intended to be a screenshot of your actual offer. So what should this entail? You should be sending all the information to the listing agent up front. So when the listing agent opens up your offer, you're going to have maybe 50 pages or so in your purchase offer. But this first page of the synopsis is going to tell them everything that's included in your offer. First and foremost, the property address is going to go here. Then you're going to have your date, the buyer's name. You're going to put the buyer or buyer's full names there, the seller or seller's full names there as well. Now, when you're putting the buyer's and the seller's names in, if you put one in regular font, the other one in caps, however you do it, make sure that they are the same. So if you want to put your buyer's name in all caps, that's fine. Just put the seller's name in all caps as well. Your purchase price, we want to make sure that we use all appropriate punctuation. So when you put your dollar values in, if say by chance your purchase price is $300,000, make sure to put your proper punctuation. So put your decimals where they're appropriate, put your commas, even put your dollar sign where appropriate so that this offer is very nice and represent you and your buyer well. Okay, your financing type. Your buyer, whether they have conventional, FHA, cash, VA, USDA, whatever their financing type is, you want to make sure that you type that in here. And that's going to be apparent from their lender letter, so you'll know exactly what the financing type is. Next, your earnest money deposit. How much is your buyer putting down? At Porterhouse, you already know that we recommend 1% of the purchase price. If the buyer can do more, that's totally fine. Whatever that earnest money deposit is, you want to type that number value out right here, of course, putting your dollar sign in front. Next is proof of funds or pre-approval. If your buyer is a cash buyer, then you would be supplying the proof of funds. If your buyer is receiving financing, like most buyers are in this market, then you're going to list that they have a pre-approval. Then you have your seller concession. Your seller concession is whatever it is that you're asking for from the seller. Make sure that your offer is very much in tune with the market. Currently, we're in a seller's market, so your seller's concession needs to be very modest to make sure that you're writing a winning offer, and we will go through that in another training. But if you're asking for 3% in closing costs, this is where you're going to put 3%. Transfer and recordation. For your buyers, this is where you're going to put the transfer and recordation that's included in your contract. Customarily, we do 50-50 split for transfer and recordation. Contingencies, whatever contingencies your buyer's offer is subject to, this is where you're going to list them. If the buyer is receiving financing, then that's the first contingency. If your buyer is subject to an appraisal, such as with FHA loans, that's going to be your second contingency. And if your buyer has an inspection contingency, that's the third one. Now, there are other contingency types, such as if your buyer had a home to sell before they purchased this home, whatever those contingencies are, you're going to list them right here. Next is your settlement date. Very simple, yet very important. These last couple lines, these are going to be our professional partners that are going to help us all get through this transaction. So you want to list your lender as well as your title company. At Porterhouse, our preferred lender, of course, is Michael Cooper of Ameris Bank Mortgage and Glennis Thomas with Velocity Title. So we make sure that we put their names and you put their contact number and then the company name there also, so that the listing agent knows exactly who to reach out to. Then here, you're just going to put your personal information to make this customized to you. So that's the details. Those are all the details for your synopsis page, but I would like to say you want to make sure that this is very nice and neat and very presentable. In order to do that, if you're going to do bold, make sure that everything is bold. If you're going to do caps, make sure that it's all in caps. If you're going to do right or centered, make sure that everything is centered and make sure that it shows very neatly, because this offer represents you and your buyer. So next is your understanding whom agents represent. In your understanding whom agents represent, we won't go through the details of this document. I will simply show you how in this training to complete it. When you're working with the buyers will acknowledge receipt of this disclosure. So you will click on buyers, and then you'll say they've acknowledged the receipt of disclosure, that Porterhouse International Realty Group, and your name goes here, the salesperson are working as, and then you would check buyer's agent, all right? So I want to point out these signature fields, as it is necessary for the buyer or buyers to sign off on the signature field up here. The space below where you see agent is not necessary for you to sign unless the buyer or buyers are unwilling or unable to sign it for themselves, in which case you're simply going to put their name or names and you would sign below, just disclosing that you've made this disclosure to the buyer. Next is going to be your consent for dual agency. Of course, we've gone over this document in other trainings, so today I'm just showing you how to complete it. This document here, you're always going to list your firm name down here. Your firm is always going to be Porterhouse International Realty Group as it pertains to you. Now, if you're representing the seller, you're going to choose seller and put their property address. If you're representing the buyer, you're going to choose buyer. Now, pay attention because there are signature spaces above this black line as well as below this black line. In all of your real estate transactions, it is going to be necessary for your client to sign above this line initially. All right? Now, in the event that there's affirmation of prior consent to dual agency, meaning that your buyer is acknowledging that they are intending to purchase a property that is listed by Porterhouse, and you've already made them aware that this property is listed by Porterhouse, then that means that they are affirming prior consent to dual agency, in which case you're going to need to come back to this document a second time, and you're going to need to have the buyers as well as the sellers to sign off on this document at the bottom, in which case the property address will be necessary and all of their names. So both parts are very, very important independently as well as together. All right, so next we're going to move into the body of the contract. This is your residential contract of sale. We're going to spend the most time on this residential contract of sale because this is where most of the meat is for your offer. Now, I want to point out each line in this contract is very important. So do your best to make sure that you read, reread, fill in everything that you see where appropriate. First and foremost, the date of the offer. Everything in here is important because it is a legally binding contract that we're creating between the buyer and the seller. So you want to be sure to do your due diligence, to be diligent to fill everything in and fill everything in accurately. So your seller's name, you're already going to find your seller's name in the public records. You're going to verify that information as we've already discussed by what's on the disclosures, just verifying that that is the seller in the public record. Then you're going to put that seller or seller's entire name in this contract. You're going to do the same thing for your buyer by including your buyer's full name in this contract. The property address, you're going to put the property address there, as well as the city, county, and zip code. Come down to paragraph 5. Most of the properties that you deal with are going to be conveyed in fee simple. There are properties in the Baltimore area and some in the more rural Southern Maryland areas that are subject to ground rent, but few in the Prince George's County area. So just pay attention. Most of them are going to be fee simple. If it has a ground rent, you're going to need to choose that and specify what the ground rent dollar amount is and what county. All right. Next is your purchase price. So you're going to plug your purchase price in right here. And when you type in your dollar value, it will populate the words for you above. Next is your terms, your payment terms. So the first thing that you're going to do, your initial deposit is going to be by check. And this highlights your earnest money deposit or the EMD. So whatever that earnest money deposit that we talked about being 1% of the purchase price, this is where you're going to put this. So that 1% will just say if this offers for $450,000, then the earnest money deposit and $4,500 is what you're going to put here. You're going to put $4,500 there. It'll populate the words over here. And that initial deposit by way of, in this field, you're going to put check, okay? And then you'll scroll on down. Usually an additional deposit is not necessary. In some cases it is, but very rarely. Next, you want to choose, it's going to be deposited into a non-interest bearing account at Porterhouse International Realty Group. Paragraph 7C, where it says all deposits will be held in escrow by, when you're representing your buyer, you're going to put Porterhouse International Realty Group as the escrow holder. So be sure to fill this information in because it is crucial to the contract. If by chance the buyer and the seller agree to hold the earnest money deposit elsewhere, you put it there. But most importantly, we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to represent our buyers well. And in order to fulfill the accounting piece that's under their fiduciary, we have to be responsible for their earnest money deposit. So you want to make sure that 99.9% of the times their deposit is held at the brokerage that represents them, all right? And that is in a non-interest bearing account when it's with Porterhouse. Next is the settlement date. Choose your settlement date. That's usually going to be 30 days out. If your buyer is a cash buyer, that's going to be sooner than 30 days, but no more than 30 days unless there's some special circumstances. And we'll talk about what those entail in our next training. You're then going to choose a financing type, and that's self-explanatory. Whatever your buyer's financing type is, you're going to choose it there. All right, financing application. Once the buyer's loan is accepted, the buyer should be doing their financing application within 3 to 5 days. I prefer to tell them to reach out to our lender the very next day, but if they need a couple extra days, this is where you're going to put this. So you want to put within 5 days, you type 5 and it's going to populate over there. And then this next piece here is where their financing contingency will expire within. So normally we would put 21 days there so that if they need to have a financing commitment by that time. Doesn't mean that you have to close by that time. It simply means that they need to have a financing commitment. So in this space, that's where we're going to put our 21 days. So any extension that you need to the contract, make sure that you also extend that financing contingency, because that's what's going to protect your buyer's earnest money deposit. All right. Now your inclusions and your exclusions. Make sure that when you take your buyer to see the property, you're paying attention to what is there in the house. And if they're asking for anything in particular that may not have otherwise conveyed, this is where you're going to put it on the contract. So when you're filling that in, be sure to put everything that you guys saw there. All right. And then here, paragraph number 12, if your buyer is using an inspection contingency, you want to make sure that you choose the appropriate space. And then we would attach the inspection addenda. All right. If they are declining an inspection, then you would choose the other space. All right. Now, paragraph number 14 and 15, they specified different types of, one is an agriculturally assessed property, if there are any taxes that need to be paid as it pertains to it. And the next one, if there are any taxes or transfer taxes that need to be paid as a result. It's asking who is going to be responsible for that. In those cases, when we represent the buyer, we put seller for both of those. Now, usually you don't face that situation, it doesn't come up, but in the event that it does, it's very important that it's in your contract. So you're going to put seller for those. All right, we're going to go past much of this because there's nothing for you to fill in on that. All right, so as we get to paragraph number 18, we're talking about addenda and disclosures. You're going to choose the addenda that you're attaching to this contract. All right, so if it's an as-is purchase, if the buyer is willing to do backup offer, first-time home buyer program, escalation clause, let's see, notice to buyer and seller. There's several of these that are going to be a part of the offer template, so you would include, and others are going to be property specific. So whatever additional addenda you're including, simply check the box beside it. All right, now paragraph number 18, where you see this blank space, other addenda or special conditions. You want to pay attention here, because if your buyer is asking for anything, such as, you don't want to get too crazy in the seller's market, but anything else that they're asking for that is not already articulated in the contract can be placed right here. Or if you have any addenda that are not included at the top, you can type the names of those addenda right there as well. We're going to keep scrolling down because we're looking for spaces that you need to fill in. The language is going to be the same for every contract that we send over, but what you fill in is what we're paying attention to today. I'm going to keep coming down. All right. Now this is almost the last page of the contract. This is where the buyers and the sellers are going to sign. And as you've noted, while we were going throughout the contract, at the bottom of each page and throughout some of the pages, there were initial spaces for the buyer and the sellers to sign. So when we finish preparing the contract, then you're going to send those over to your buyer for those signatures. Now, once your contract is actually accepted by the seller and all of the signatures and initials have been obtained, that's going to be your date of contract acceptance or your date of ratification. It's going to be very important that you come back and put this date of ratification into your contract, because this is the date that all of your contingencies start. All right. And if that buyer is a first-time Maryland home buyer, you want to check this box here as well and include the first-time home buyer addendum. Now, this next page is just for contact information. When you represent the buyer in the transaction, you do not want to give away any of their contact information to the other parties to the transaction. Their name, however, is imperative. You want to make sure that their full legal name is there in the contract. Same thing for the seller. When you're writing this contract, you want to make sure that the buyer's name is there, the full seller's name is there, and then the brokerage information for both brokerages. You want to make sure that this is fully executed. Underwriters, now they're looking at the entire contract to make sure that everything is complete, and so is the title company. So you want to make sure that you have all of this. If you're working with the buyer, then of course you're the selling brokerage, so you're going to put your company name, Porterhouse International Realty Group, broker of record, Jasmine Porter, sales associate, office address, license numbers for both. Everything that is listed here, you need to fill it in. The same goes for the listing brokerage, the listing company name, broker of record, sales associate, and so forth and so on. You're going to find this information in Bright MLS. You'll be able to look it up and grab it so that you can copy and paste it in there. But make sure that that's properly filled in and you select who that brokerage is representing. So listing brokerage is representing listing, selling brokerage representing the buyer, or if there's an intercompany agency situation, that's where you're going to choose that too. All right, so we're going to scroll on down, as many of your buyers are going to be FHA borrowers. In this market, many of the buyers are purchasing with FHA, of course, because it allows them the lowest down payment of only 3.5%. So this document is very important, and you're going to get the information for this document from the buyer's pre-approval. So the date for all of your documents needs to be the same. It's the date of your offer, buyer's information, so their full name, seller's full name, property address. These are going to be the common theme on every one of the documents that you're going to see. You want to make sure that this information is properly placed on every single document where indicated, right? Mortgage insurance premium that's listed there. Most of the time, this is going to be the only part that you don't have up front. You can request that information if need be from the lender. Otherwise, the base loan amount is going to be here. Now, just note, if they are an FHA borrower, their down payment is 3.5%. So consequently, that means that their base loan amount is going to be 96.5% of the purchase price. Okay, and that's for all FHA loans. So what you want to do is, whatever that purchase price is, if it's $400,000, you're going to take that $400,000, multiply it by 96.5%, and put your base loan amount there. Loan program, 30-year fixed, or if whatever that loan program is, that's going to be indicated on your pre-approval, you're going to put that there. Term of loan, 30 years or 15 years, whatever that loan term is. And then your interest rate, which is going to be found on your pre-approval as well. All right. Now, depending on the lender, will determine whether or not their loan origination fees or discount fees, that's where this would go. Now, with Michael Cooper and Ameris Mortgage, they do not charge our buyers loan origination fees or discount points or fees or anything, so those are zero when we work with our partners. Paragraph number 4, the FHA amendatory clause. very, very important. You want to make sure that this number that you're going to type in here is the same as your purchase price. So if your purchase price is $400,000, you're going to put your $400,000 right there. And of course, you're going to center everything and make sure that it's nice and prominently placed in there so that they can see everything that's in your contract. Okay? So this amount, your FHA mandatory clause, this is what's going to protect your buyer. In the event that an appraisal comes back less than the purchase price, in that case, your buyer is not bound to purchase the property for $400,000 because this clause protects them. It says that they're not bound to buy the property for a penny more than what it appraises for. So this is for your buyer's protection. Be sure to fill that out. Right? Next is paragraph number 7, and that's where your lender required repairs allocation comes in. Now, this is going to totally depend on the condition of the property. Sometimes people will simply put $1,500 for lender required repairs, but I want to caution you that if you go to a property and it looks like it has quite a bit of disrepair, you might need to ask for more in lender required repairs. Or if the property is a newly renovated property, you might want to ask for less in lender required repairs. So just pay attention to the condition of the property when you put your dollar value there, right? And lastly, for the buyer's protection, they need to get a home inspection. So you're going to have them to initial everywhere that says buyer and sign off on everything. Now, I want to point out something because on this document, this is one of the few addenda that you as the buyer's agent will need to sign. There's about 3 or 4 of those in the contract that you will need to sign off on with your buyer, and this is one of them. So make sure that their signatures and initials are there and yours is there also. All right. So as we saw in that last addenda, it says for your protection, get a home inspection. This is the actual corresponding addenda that we say that, you know, we understand that it's in their best interest to get a home inspection. And whether it's one buyer or 2, you're going to check to indicate whether it be I or we, and then have the buyer to sign that you are advising them at all costs to get a home inspection. We need them to be safe. We need them to be protected. All right. Now, here is the home inspection addenda. If they are adding the property inspection as a contingency to the contract, then this is the addendum that you want to use. In this addendum, you're going to do the same thing as we talked about. You're going to make sure that the date is the same as the date of the contract, the buyer's full legal name, the seller's full legal name, the full property address, and all of that information is prominently placed on this addendum. Then you're going to scroll down and you're going to check off, or you're going to assign the appropriate initial space to your buyer for each one of these types of inspections that you want to request. So if it's structural, you're going to place your buyer's signature field there for your buyer to sign off on. You're going to do the same thing for each inspection type. Now here, you want to ask for about 7 days for a property inspection for your buyer. If your buyer has some extenuating circumstances where they're going to be out of town or have to travel or something like that, then that's when it's okay to ask for a little bit more. But let's think about it. When we're submitting this offer on behalf of our buyer, we're submitting an offer that the seller is going to accept. So you don't want to go in asking for 14 days for inspections on these items. I would say keep it to about 7 days for these property inspections. Now, in the event that your buyer needs an extension on this contingency, you simply send over an extension request to the listing agent before the end of this time period. Now, remember we talked about at the end of the contract, that date of contract acceptance being the date of ratification. That is when this contingency period it starts. So if your contract is on the 31st is the date of acceptance, the first of the next month is day 1. Okay, so just pay attention to those time frames. And again, you can choose any of the inspection types that your buyer would like to have. I'll go back up and I'll tell you the ones that we want to include for all of our buyers who are requesting to have an inspection. You want to include structural and mechanical for all of them. I actually would check off on everything on that first page, your radon inspection. If the property was built before 1978 and they have children, if they want to get that lead-based inspection done, then choose that too. Many properties don't have chimneys, so if it does not have a chimney, you do not need to choose chimney inspection. I'm going to point out paragraph G, because in paragraph G, you would put, if that is termite, any, all, any additional inspection that you want to choose that you do not see already articulated in the paragraphs above, this is where you're going to place what type of inspection. And then for each one of these fields, make sure to put your buyers, assign their initials there, and put the number of days that you're requesting for that contingency. All right? And as you can see throughout each one of the pages, there are initial spaces for your buyer. Once you actually fill this in, you're going to assign the role of the buyer and make sure that every one of the buyer's signatures and initials are where they're supposed to be. All right? This next page, page number 3 of this property inspection addendum, is very important because paragraph number 4, it highlights the buyer's general right to terminate the contract. If you choose this paragraph, number 4B, then what 4B is saying that if for any reason the buyer's not satisfied with the property within the inspection period, they can terminate this contract without reason to the seller. So just make sure you have that conversation and use this paragraph wisely. And this paragraph is not effective, however, unless both the buyer and the seller sign off on it. If the buyer says, hey, I want the unconditional right to terminate, then you want to have them to sign off there. If the seller doesn't sign, then that is what we call an official counter, and we'll go into those details in another training. Right? Read through this contract because it specifies the days, the amount of time that your buyer has to respond, or the amount of days, my apologies, that the seller has to respond to your buyer's repair request. And after the seller's response, how many days your buyer has to respond to the seller, and so forth and so on. It even outlines repair corrections for reinspection and damage to the property. All of these things are outlined in this document. Make sure that it's signed, and we're going to scroll on down to the next document in your template. The next document in your template is going to be your addendum of. In your addendum of clauses, a highlight for each document, because trust me, I've seen so many where people don't put all of this information in every contract. They kind of rush through it to fill in the terms without actually putting in some of the most important information, which is very simple and straightforward. The date of the contract, buyer, seller's name, and property address. So for this addendum of clauses, you're going to see several options for your buyer. Each one of these options are based on the buyer's needs and property specific. It's not a one size fits all. So we talked in the beginning about the transfer and recordation taxes, where it says shall be paid by, you're going to put 50-50 split, because remember your synopsis was a screenshot or a snapshot of your actual offer. Now this is the place within the offer that you're going to put that information. If your buyer has a property to sell, then you would do coinciding settlement. If it is contingent upon the seller purchasing another home, then that's when you would choose that. Anything here that's specific to the transaction you want to choose. One of the things that comes up most often is a home warranty. So you simply choose which of the parties, either buyer or seller, you're asking to provide the home warranty. You would put the purchase price or the maximum amount. You would put the company, and then you would put the terms here and make sure that's initialed by both parties. Now, because we're in the middle of COVID-19, this is a COVID-19 related addendum. It is not required in all cases. Should you need to include this, it's here for your convenience. It simply offers in advance extension timeframes in the event that there's a COVID-19 related delay, in which case you choose whether or not you're going to allow a preliminary 30-day extension or 15-day extension or even a 7-day extension if there's some reason related to COVID-19. And when you fill out this document, you don't have to go back and ask for an extension once the delay happens. This document is already in place in advance. Same thing for the right to terminate. So in the event that that delay, whatever it was, although it was COVID-19 related, if it's not satisfied, then you choose whether or not you want a 30-day or 60-day period before the contract is terminated. Now, that is it for now, but I will say that there are a couple of other documents that I want to include for you guys, because this addendum of clauses used to include the seller concession. Now there's a separate addendum that says seller concession, and that is where you're going to include your request for closing costs on behalf of your buyer. So let me go out here, and I'm going to go ahead and go to that addendum so you can see what it looks like. So as we said in the beginning, when we were looking at our offer checklist, these are the documents that are included there. Now, the only thing that we don't have is the seller disclosures, but those documents, you're going to capture them from Bright MLS. You're going to go to the listing and you're going to look for documents. And if they're not there, you're simply going to ask the listing agent to send them over to you. All right, so now let me see if I can go out of this. The screen will allow. So it's taken a little while to refresh. So I will go to that document. If it doesn't refresh in a moment, okay, there we go. Don't need to share it at the moment. Let me go back. And let me find the seller concession document for you guys. And I will add that to your template as well. I'm going to go to templates. And I'm going to search. And this is what you do for any addenda that you need to add to your loop. If it's not already there, you're simply going to go to add documents, go to the templates so that you can pull from the library on the back, and you're going to search that document. You see right here where it says seller contribution addendum. We're going to select that and ask it to copy it into our loop. Okay, so now when we go back to our loop, it's right there. So we're going to take that, we're going to pull it down, and we're going to put it after our contract because that's very important for our buyers. Then we're going to go ahead and open that up, the seller contribution addendum, so you can take a look at that. Now, here, because this is a brand new document that we've added to our loop, you're going to see where it says autofill. This is a crucial step that you're going to take in the beginning when you are preparing your offer. We're not preparing the offer in this training, so we're not going to go through all of these steps. But when you open your documents for the first time, you're going to see autofill. You're going to put the buyer's full names, the seller's full names, the property address, listing agent, buying agent, brokerage, and all of the appropriate parties. You're going to make sure that every person's name is already included in this autofill section or the view details section. That way, when you're able to autofill, then it'll put that information into your contract for you. And Dotloop Premium does a pretty good job. I would say they're probably about 90%, 80 to 90% efficient. So most of your documents, as long as it's interactive, when you put that information in there, it will autofill. You do still need to go through each document to scrub it because remember, you deserve best, your client deserves the best, and we want to make sure that their offer is very well prepared. So although that autofill feature is available for us, we do not rely on it totally. So you want to double check and triple check to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. Okay, so now this is the seller contribution addendum. In this addendum, you already know what needs to go at the top, the same thing as each of the other pages, the date of the contract, buyer, seller, property address. But now here is where you're going to put in however much closing costs your buyer needs. If your buyer is asking for a dollar amount, you're going to put the dollar amount there. Or if they're asking for a percentage of the purchase price, you're going to put the percentage of the purchase price there too. Okay? So whichever of those two is appropriate, that's the one that you're going to choose, and you're going to put that in the contract for your buyer and make sure that they sign off on everything. All right, so I'm going to leave that document for now, and I will go to the matrix so that you guys can see where to get your seller disclosures, because everything on our checklist is going to be completed at this point. The only thing we don't have are going to be seller's disclosures. So let me show you where to pull those seller disclosures. So I will simply pull up a property just for the sake of the demonstration. In these documents that we're going to pull up, we're going to download those documents onto our computer and upload them as a PDF file in our Dotloop, into the loop that's specific to that purchase. You're going to put it right there. Right, and let's see. Now I'm going to search a listing, one of our listings that we already know has the property disclosures for you guys. Coming soon. Okay, so this is our listing on Darlington Court. You see the information right there, and you see this, what looks like a little piece of paper. If you hover above it, it says Bright Documents. You're going to click on that where it says Bright Documents. And when you open those documents, it's going to show you the property disclosures. Let's see, hopefully it'll take us right back to it. There you go. So now here are your property disclosures. So you're simply going to check on those documents there and ask it to email it to you or download them. So you can either view them so you know what those disclosures are. And I'm going to open it up for you. Now this property, because this property is in Southern Maryland, there's certain addenda that are necessary that are not necessarily in DC or in Prince George's County and other parts of Maryland. This first one, fair share school construction, excise, only Southern Maryland, real estate transfer disclosure, and others. So those are just for Southern Maryland. That's the first one. And then there are various disclosures there. So you're simply going to have them to email it to you. So if you select it, ask the system to email it to you. So put your email address in there. Mine is already there, jasmine@porterhouserealtypros.com, and then I will simply click on send. So when that sends it to me, it'll be in my email, and I can download it as a PDF file, and then I will go back to my loop, and I will upload it there. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back. I do not want to share the document as of yet. I'm simply going to go back into the full loop instead of into the document. And then I'm going to add a document. So to add the document, I'm going to browse. I'm going to browse to see what's on my computer that I just downloaded. Now, I already have these documents on my computer, so I did not need to go to my email, but you will need to do so. All right? So we have these documents here. Contribution addendum, we have all of those there, and now we're going to upload them into that loop. Okay, and because you've uploaded those documents, they're going to go to the top, but you want to keep your loop nice and tidy. So you're going to drag those on down to where they should be, and those are going to be before the please accept our offer. So you're going to drag these down to make sure that your offer doesn't get all disheveled from adding documents to the loop after the template has been created. So drag those on down to the appropriate places for them. And once we finish this process, we're actually going to prepare them. And the preparation is very easy. You're simply going to put your buyer's initial and signature spaces in them. All right, so let's take a look at this document. I think this is the one. This one is already prepared. When you open one of the documents, here we go, Charles County. When you open one of the documents that's from your MLS, or if the listing agent sends it over to you, you want to make sure that you put the property address in there. You want to make sure that the seller's information, well, a name, or make sure that the buyer's name and date are there, because the seller's information is going to be added by the listing agent, okay? So make sure that you add your field. So we're going to go to signature, and we're going to add a space for our buyer to sign. Because remember, documents that we upload in PDF format are not going to be interactive. So that simply means that they won't already be prepared. So if I wanted to sign it, I would go there. But since I'm going to assign it to my buyer, I'm going to assign it to the role of the buyer there. And once I add my buyer's name to the view details field, along with their email address, their name will actually populate here on the drop-down tab. So that's how you're going to prepare your document for your buyer, right? So once you've actually filled in all of the information, then you're going to want to proofread your contract. You're going to proofread it 2 to 3 times at a minimum to make sure that everything that you need is necessary, okay? Now I'm just going to take you back to your offer checklist, because that's where we began, and now you'll see how it all comes together. You've seen every component here. You have your introduction letter, offer synopsis, the lender letter, which is what we're going to add from the lender, earnest money deposit, all the way down to the disclosures, all right? So that is how you're going to prepare your offer. Now, for this particular buyer, we don't yet have a lender letter. We can do one just for the sake of practice, but let's just pretend that we have a lender letter and an earnest money deposit in here. In order for us to send this offer, we're going to check on this entire offer or contract documents folder, and then we're going to deselect anything that we do not want to send. So that checklist is not necessary to send. Let's see, difference in commission addendum, that's not going to be necessary. Settler contribution addendum, that was necessary, so we don't need 2 of those. But everything that you do want to share, you're going to check off on it, and then you're going to either download it as one or simply share it with your buyer. So you go to share, and that's how you're going to share it. All right, and then you choose who you want to share that with. And that is how you prepare your offer. That's your offer template. And now you know how to work in your buyer's template. I'll see you guys and talk to you on our next training. Hope you got some great information today.